morning and welcome to City Council's listening session. This listening session will serve as a time for the council to hear the perspectives of the community on the recent events that have taken place in Rochester, including the death of Daniel Prude, the reimagining of public safety, and the resulting protests. Similar to our Speak to Council sessions, the council is only here to listen. As a reminder, all speakers have 3 minutes for their comments. A staff member will notify speakers when they have 30 seconds remaining, and speakers will be removed from the Zoom call once their time has expired. Before we begin this listening session, join me please in observing a moment of silence to remember the life of Daniel Prude. Now let us begin.
Corey Robinson.
Hi, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge and endorse the demands of Free the People Rock, but that's not specifically what I am here to discuss. The following comments are directed at everybody here not named Mary Lupion. I've heard the word accountability thrown around very freely by almost everybody here in the last month, and it is the use and misuse of that word that I'm here to address. So to be clear, holding Mayor Warren and the police brass accountable for this cover-up, good. Holding the killers accountable for their murder, that's good too. But I'd like you to ask yourselves on council, when you spend hundreds of millions of dollars of our money on training a vicious attack dog for years and then it kills an innocent man, who is responsible? Is it the dog or is it you? We've been telling you and will keep telling you, the police started as slave catchers, overseers, and private militias for the wealthy. They became the armed forces of land theft and a paid side hustle for the KKK. Then they became the agents of lynching and Jim Crow and union busting. Then they murdered civil rights activists and imprisoned and tortured millions of Black men in this new Jim Crow we live in. Tell me what changed that you throw $100 million at them every year. The reason why this thread remains unbroken in our country is because of people like you who try to make changes around the edges of a system that's rotten and violent to its core. A police murder like Daniel Prude was always a matter of when, not if. And the fact that you continue arming, equipping, and paying for this violence puts blood on your hands. In 4 months, you've spent $95 million on general cop garbage and approved $16 million for a new cop clubhouse. And now you insult our intelligence with the language of accountability. I do not see any leaders here, just rats trying to jump off a sinking ship. 1 month ago, when it was still fashionable to be a cop apologist, Loretta Scott called the mobilization of the community against the police substation, and I quote, offensive. You said it's offensive that people would read from a script urging you to stop paying for lynching. That's the disdain you've shown for coordinated community action. You are patronizing until the moment it becomes impossible because there's a man dead in the street. That is not leadership. There are only 3 explanations for your devotion to pouring money into police terrorism. 1, ignorance. 2, malice. 3, cowardice. I won't sit here and speculate on exactly which motivates each of you, but it doesn't actually matter because any one of them disqualifies you from a position of leadership in this city. So although I would suggest that each of you resign, I know that you won't, so I'll request instead, apologize to the people of Rochester, for your role, and tell us in concrete terms what you will do to begin taking money away from the system of racial terrorism known as the police. You have evaded that question so far because you don't consider yourselves accountable to us. That time is over. You will not talk your way out of this or demean and dismiss our righteous anger anymore. Power to the people, defund these criminals, and hold your own selves accountable. Thank you, that's my time.
Carolyn Hoffman.
She is joining momentarily. Carolyn, your time is now. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Power to the people, defund these criminals, and hold your own selves
Let
accountable.
me turn off the live because I think there's a lag. There we go. Hi, everybody.
Carolyn Hoffman.
She is joining momentarily. I think the stream is still up on your computer. Once you begin speaking, we'll start your time.
Okay. So I'm here to support the demands of Free the People Rock. I've been in the streets for the past couple of weeks, and I've seen the police respond to protesters in a way that does not befit our city or our society anymore. I think that the police and the jail system that we have are an outdated moral system. It doesn't make sense anymore. We have better ways of solving crisis, and we have better ways of supporting each other. I'd also like to take some silence with my time for everyone to just kind of notice the moment, what's going on in your body, any squirminess or kind of pushback to want to get away, to want to avoid the facts, and to think about Daniel, which is the reason that we're here, and the sacrifice that he made for us to have these conversations.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're going to hear from a lot of people tonight who've been saying a lot of these things for a long time. And I know that all of you have been educated at this point as to how to move forward differently and how to do things better. And I am trusting that that is the next steps that we're going to see as soon as possible, or we're going to continue to see kids in the street and a disproportionate response from the police to those kids. Thank you.
Michael Edelman.
Hello, my name is Michael Edelman, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about the Rochester Police Department's indiscriminate and excessive response to the protests regarding the murder of Daniel Prude. So on Friday, September 4th, I attended the protests. I was standing peacefully with a sign, nowhere near the police officers, and I was shot multiple times with pepper balls by the Rochester Police Department. I went out again on September 5th. Again, I was peacefully holding a sign. I was standing on the sidewalk, nowhere near the police, and they again shot me with pepper balls. They also tear gassed myself as well as many other people that night. On both occasions, police officers shot me at close range in the upper body and were not aiming towards the feet. The reason that I feel that both of these nights especially have been were problematic is because it's my understanding that the City Council asked the Rochester Police Department not to use pepper balls at all. Since then, the Rochester Police Department has shot probably hundreds, if not thousands, of members of the Rochester community, including members of City Council, with the pepper balls. It's also my understanding that it's the policy of Rochester Police Department to aim at the feet of people when they use pepper balls and to only use them when faced with active aggression. And if that is the case, RPD has violated both of those policies on the nights that I talked about. I also have video footage from September 4th of RPD shooting pepper balls at members of the press who were nowhere near the protesters. So if there's somewhere that I could forward that video, I would love to do that. On both of the nights that I mentioned, RPD declared the protest an unlawful assembly almost immediately and then began to shoot at protesters. In some cases, there were protesters throwing items at the police. I do understand the police do need to protect themselves if items are being thrown at them, even if they're in full riot gear, and those items are plastic water bottles. However, I don't feel like that's a valid excuse to then shoot pepper balls and tear gas hundreds, if not thousands, of other Rochester residents for hours on end after they're faced with active aggression. On Saturday, I witnessed a protester be knocked completely unconscious. As they were lying on the ground motionless, RPD continued to shoot pepper balls at them. So I would really like City Council or some kind of outside entity to review body cam footage from these 2 nights especially, as well as other nights of protests, in order to review whether RPD has acted in an unlawful manner and has violated our rights to protest. I really don't feel like anything will happen or there will be any accountability unless someone does review that footage. All right, as was the case with the murder of Daniel Prue. Thank you very much.
Barney Radford,
They are not in the waiting room, so we're going to move on to the next person.
Jane Blieg,
They're being admitted right now. Jane, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we will begin your time when you begin speaking.
Yes, this is Jane Blieg. I am a longtime city resident, more than 28 years, moved back into the city after being out for a while because I wanted to be active in city. Okay, thank you. So the reason that I wanted to speak is that I am deeply distressed about the lack of leadership in our community. What I feel is that the leaders are all pulling in different directions, that some of the leaders have actually done things to hide the truth from community residents. There are some leaders that have been accused and actually convicted of illegal uses of money. The local Democratic committee is in disarray. People on all sides of the issues don't really trust the mayor. So I think until we get some kind of leadership that is connected, that trusts each other, that knows how to work together collaboratively, even when they don't agree on things, we are not likely to deal with our challenges in the city and beyond the city well. I mean, what's been going on in the legislature is crazy. I'm a member of the local Democratic committee, and what's been going on there in terms of the Board of Elections makes sense, but it is not helpful for our community. So what I'm asking is for the leaders to figure out a way to bring the different factions together, young and old, black and white, people from different political backgrounds, and figure out how we can all start rowing the boat in the same direction. I think it will take some outstanding facilitation by non-political representatives to help accomplish that. I think people need to put aside their egos and start thinking more about what's better for the community and the people as a whole, less for their own faction, less for their own political group, less for their own selves and their own ability to hold power. And I think that was the main thing I wanted to say. I wish that more attention could be given by the leaders to how can we work together better. I think that's essential. Thank you very much.
Mike Blieg,
Mike, you can begin speaking whenever you're ready.
Hello, this is Mike Blieg, and I first want to thank Councilmember Lightfoot I just learned today that there's going to be a new response to mental health calls and also domestic violence calls. And that is very consistent with what I had sent to him and others last week about the crisis assistance health help out on the streets initiative. And I want to make sure, not make sure, but I want to recommend that we do expand it to like what Eugene, Oregon has done with Cahoots, so that we really get community organizations involved in this, and we really make it a more neighborhood-based, community-based initiative, and really get good engagement by communities on it. I think you know about the funding for this kind of program, so I don't need to go through that. And we will need, before too long, we will need additional mental health and treatment providers and social services personnel to help in making it effective for the people who are brought in as part of this initiative, this other response. So I think that'll be very important. And as I've spoken previously to a number of you, I think this should also be linked with the pre-arrest diversion initiative, so that in fact, the programs, the various services that are available, both for the Cahoots kind of calls, but also for misdemeanors that really the person needs community resources to really build the strengths to avoid this kind of problem in the future. So I strongly recommend that these two methods of building individual capabilities be combined together with and linked with the county to make it more effective throughout this area. So that's my recommendation. And lastly, there is good data that has just been issued by the RIT Center for Public Safety Initiatives on the various
30
calls, the
seconds.
non-disciplinary calls that are handled by the police. So thank you very much and look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.
Molly Hannah,
She has not entered the waiting room, so we're going to move on to the next guest.
Courtney Fay,
Courtney, whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself and we will begin your time.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to address you tonight. I know there are many who will speak here tonight and many more who would like an opportunity to speak to you directly. I have lived in this city for 20 years. I take pride in being a resident of the city of Rochester. We have wonderful communities throughout the city and around it. Our city has been betrayed by the officials who were elected to represent the people and the police who swore to protect and serve all citizens. The death of Daniel Prude was a tragedy. This murder was covered up by the city and by our police. Daniel Prude was offered no compassion or dignity and was instead dehumanized and not seen. He needed help that night, and the officers sent to help him did the opposite of what they were there to do. When police swear an oath, they swear to protect and serve all citizens. Too often, police use force and restraint as a means to end a situation quickly, even when that is not in the best interest of the person they are there to help. Protecting and serving the public doesn't stop when someone is in distress, or even if they are committing a crime or may have committed a crime. Despite the revelations that the police wrote on a report that they should make Daniel Prude a suspect, he was not a criminal that night. I am asking you, the Rochester City Council, to take action because we need our elected representatives in this city to hear the protests and to serve our public in good faith. Our city must learn from this unnecessary loss of life. These are the actions I request you support through legislation or demands to appropriate authorities. The officers who murdered Daniel Prude must be fired and arrested. We must have a policy in our city that when a police officer breaks the public trust, they swore to uphold, they can no longer serve the public. Redirect emergency mental health calls to a mental health crisis response team. Create a Department of Public Safety to house the crisis intervention team, mobile emergency response, pathways to peace, and other violence interruption and non-police community-based safety programs. Ban the use of chemical weapons by Rochester Police Department. Ban the use of spit hoods by the Rochester Police Department.
30
Prohibit
seconds.
morning bands from covering police badges worn by the Rochester Police Department. I would like to thank Color for Change for that list. I would also ask that you investigate Mayor Warren's handling of this cover-up. As the legislative branch of the city, it is your job to provide oversight as to the local executive branch. In summary, I want to say that Rochester has a lot to offer, and our Black communities are a vital, beautiful part of that. Black Rochesterians have a right to feel like they are heard and seen, and that they can count on our police to protect and serve them equally. I believe there are good police officers.
Beth Laidlaw.
Good evening, President Scott and council members. I'm grateful for your making this forum available to citizens of our community. Thank you also for the leadership you've shown for the last 2 weeks, particularly in standing with the peaceful protesters. Thank you for repealing the police station funding and for defunding the police department by transferring the Families and Victims Services Office to the Recreation and Youth Services Department. I've lived in the city for 33 years, and much of that time I've served as a children's advocate and as an ethics professor at MCC's downtown campus. I ask you this evening to use your authority to stop RPD's use of gas on our children. Short-term exposure to tear gas causes burning, blurred vision, chest tightening, nausea, and vomiting. All we have witnessed these past 2 weeks. Some of you personally have experienced this in these past 2 weeks. Long-term exposure or exposure to large doses of tear gas causes blindness, respiratory failure, and induces menstruation. Gassing is immoral. Gassing children is unconscionable. RPD's tear gassing of our protesters is unjustifiable, and it's an example of police brutality itself. I'm asking you please to end this practice. And again, I'm just so very grateful for the time and the energy you've shown and the heroism in leading our community through this really difficult time. Thank you.
Sonia.
Hello, my name is Sonia McGaffigan, and I'm a sophomore at University of Rochester. I've been an active member at the protest demanding justice for Daniel Prude. Being a student, I'm part of the Rochester community. Therefore, I have a responsibility to other members of my community who work at University of Rochester or under the vast influence of the university. Black and people of color folks are and historically have been terrorized by the RPD. Because I believe that Black Lives Matter, I went to attend the protest to demand justice for Daniel Prude on Saturday, September 5th, where I was later arrested. I'd never protested before, and I was excited to be an active member of the community and be a part of the fight against the systemic injustice Black, Indigenous, and people of color folk face today, and by default, our society as a whole. I was on my bike, about to head home back to campus, and I had to pass by the front line. All of a sudden, the police just started charging towards us. I don't know what prompted it, but it seemed random from my perspective. I tried to bike away, but I was mounting my bike. An officer forcefully pushed me off, and two more of them pinned me down to the ground and handcuffed me. Tear gas was sprayed directly in my face. I still have a big bruise on my leg from the impact, and the handcuffs were so tight, they left marks for even a few days after the fact. But let me tell you, in that moment, all I could think about was how grateful I was for the huge ATV helmet I was wearing that some other protesters had given me for my own safety. They hauled me off to the police department where they charged me with unlawful assembly. I never saw my bike again. I am grateful that I was not seriously injured, but I can't help but attribute that to the whiteness of my skin. I can only imagine what would have happened if I was a person of color. I was also extremely concerned throughout my arrest due to the lack of COVID regulations. Not one single person within the RPD station was wearing a mask. Even the people sitting at computers doing paperwork and taking my fingerprints. So much for all the measures the rest of us do on a daily basis to keep our community safe. This experience had me questioning who the police were really protecting. You might say, well, the community, but half the community was there at the protest being tear gassed and shot at by police. While I now call Rochester home, I am originally from Alaska. The media and even the mayor used me and others who were arrested as a scapegoat, specifically calling me an outside aggravator. I never had the intention to destroy buildings or anything, as Mayor Lovely Warren herself put it. I was unarmed and peaceful and trying to protect others. The news media has skewed the objective of the protesters. I wanted to share my story to highlight how inaccurately the media can portray the protesters' goals and perspectives. There was no riot. The only ones using extreme violence were police, and I am not an outsider.
Mary Zakari.
Hi, I'd like to echo what Beth Laidlaw a couple people ago said in regards to thanking you for your time and your leadership over the last couple of weeks. My name is Mary Zakari. I was born and raised in Rochester. I plan to buy a home in the city soon as well. I'm here to talk about 3 items: the killing of Daniel Prude, the cover-up of that killing, and the gross violations of the people's First Amendment right to assemble through RPD's assault on innocent people. There's one common denominator to these 3 things, and that's the Rochester Police disregard to the oath they swore and to the community they are tasked with serving and protecting. If you watched 10 seconds of that video and didn't think, why aren't they giving him a blanket? Then you should check your pulse. We treat animals better than those officers treated Daniel Prude. And as you must know, this is not a new problem in Rochester. Over the past week, I've gotten a history lesson from local organizers and community members who have lived for decades under the over-policing of their neighborhoods and the terror that comes with it. It is history and the current state, not through reform because we tried that, but from fundamental radical change that involves reimagining policing and listening to the ideas of this community. The first step in listening to the community is to meet the demands of Free the People Rochester. 1, fire and charge the officers involved in the killing of Daniel Prude. The police swear to serve and protect. There are no caveats to that. There are no exceptions. The oath is not to serve and protect people that look like you or act like you. It's not to serve and protect those that you understand or that you can relate to. It is to protect and serve, period. Why have those officers not been fired? Daniel was not our first and he will not be our last. Without accountability, why would we expect this type of thing not to happen again? Without accountability, we are all to blame for the next Black man or woman to die at the hands of the police. Accountability. That brings me to the cover-up and Free the People Rock's second demand, for Lovely Warren and Sandra Doorley to resign. Whether or not Mayor Warren is being truthful in her reports of not knowing the details of this case until August does not matter. As mayor, she oversees the police department. Their ability to hide the facts of this case for so long shows her failure to manage them. Furthermore, she has remained silent as the community mourns, when she does speak, she's saying nothing. Additionally, her mismanagement of the protests is unspeakable. She could not answer this council's questions of who was in charge and who was making calls out there on that militaristic front line. Additionally, she is allowing the police department to run the city's budget into the ground with the unnecessary, over-the-top presence and equipment. Which brings me to my final topic, RPD's violent response to peaceful protests. But I'm out of time now, so I'll just say that after being shot with pepper bullets and tear gassed in my hometown, I will never be the same. And the image of a mother and father with their 10-year-old child between them, covered in white powder on the Court Street Bridge, pushing through a crowd to seek safety, will forever burn in my memory. Black Lives Matter, and thank you for your time.
Mary Kruger,
Mary, you're muted. You might need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Mary Kruger. I am a resident of the city of Rochester. I also went out on Friday, September 4th to protest and demand justice for Daniel Prude and his family and to show my support for the Black Lives Matter movement. When almost 2,000 of us approached the public safety building on the bridge, we were met with a line of officers who looked like they were ready for war, dressed head to toe in riot gear, while the protesters had water bottles and umbrellas. Within 5 minutes of approaching them, they escalated the situation, began firing tear gas into the crowd. I know RPD's made statements that they didn't use rubber bullets on protesters, but I also know the injuries that I sustained in being shot at point blank range with both pepper bullets and something else. And I am almost certain that they were using rubber bullets, like I said, based on the injuries that I had. People asked me if I knew who the officers were, and there's no way to tell. Through the umbrellas, I could see boots charging at us, but it was really like a scene out of a movie. And even if their name tags weren't covered with their so-called mourning badges, I still wouldn't have known who did what to me. But I do know I was assaulted by an officer for protesting peacefully over the cover-up of Daniel Prude's murder. And I know so many more demonstrators had similar experiences. But it's not about me and my pain. It's about the justice for Daniel Prude and his family, and the way that our so-called leadership in this city has handled the situation is inexcusable. While City Council has taken some steps to try and bring justice, I truly believe you need to be doing more. Not even 1 month ago, you approved funding a new police substation while demands were simultaneously being made from city residents to stop this funding. At the time, you said it was too far along to stop the funding and it had to be passed. But it's clear from the legislation you passed yesterday to redact the funding for the new police station that you have more power that you might even be aware of. Redacting the funding for that substation is just one area where you were able to exercise your power. But you have more power than that, and I really encourage you to be using it now as much as you can. We have such little leadership in this community, so we need City Council to be exercising every power you have to actually give our community what we need and deserve. I urge you to do everything in your power to help the people's demands be met. Fire and prosecute the officers that murdered Daniel Prude. Free them all. Drop all charges against all protesters since May 30th. Demilitarize and defund RPD. Pass Daniel's law and the immediate resignation of Mayor Lovely Warren, Deputy Mayor James Smith, and DA Sandra Dorley. Thank you for your time.
Jane Light,
Jane, you just need to unmute yourself and then you can begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Jane Lythe, and I'm a city resident, buying my home over 31 years ago in the city while I was employed by the Rochester City School District as a teacher of the speech and hearing handicapped. I have spent my career and my life helping people protect their hearing. People should be able to protest safely without fear that non-lethal sonic weapons designed for war will be used against them. I was shocked while watching a live broadcast of a protest recently in our city when I heard a familiar sound, the siren of an LRAD, a long-range acoustic device. I had learned of these devices while following the protests at Standing Rock in the Dakotas in 2016. The Academy of Doctors of Audiology, the American Speech and Hearing Association, and the NIH, amongst others, have asked that these devices be banned against protesters. They are long-range sonic weapons, and they were originally meant for the military. They are capable of inflicting severe, debilitating permanent harm on crowd participants in the form of irreversible hearing loss, tinnitus, ringing in your ears, vestibular dysfunction, dizziness or loss of balance, and barotrauma, airplane ear as it's known. Originally developed for the military, the decibel level of speech or sound, and in this case, sirens or chirping, presented to the LRADs is unsafe. Imagine 162 decibels coming at you and you can't even distinguish from where it's coming from. I'll give you some examples. A passenger car driving by at 25 feet is about 60 decibels. The threshold of loudness that causes pain in healthy adults is between 120 and 140 decibels. Now you're talking about a device that can aim 162 decibels at you. The impact of the sound energy is an impact, just like a baton or rubber bullets. But its targets are the eardrums, tiny bones in your middle ear, and hair cells in your inner ear. We as a community can help lessen the long-term effects of police intervention, trauma, if we can honestly and openly care for each other, as well as advocate for legal and political changes.
That's time.
Erica Newberger.
Hi, thank you to City Council for having this listening session so that residents can speak about their experience with protest in the city, particularly recently. I've been at many of these protests and the Rochester Police Department is completely out of control. I've attended protests in Rochester with regularity since May. Just about each week I would go out to something. And only once the death of Daniel Prude and the cover-up came out and the city started reacting towards something specific that RPD specifically did they start retaliating and becoming so aggressive towards protesters. On September 5th, I inhaled a lot of the tear gas and watched as my friend was shot in the face with a pepper ball, just missing his glasses and eye. I understand that these weapons are not meant to be used at point blank towards people, but that was done. I experienced the LRAD and saw the flashbang canisters thrown towards the protest. We were deemed an unlawful gathering just about as soon as we got to the intersection of Broad and Exchange. And within a few minutes of that, after telling us to disperse or risk arrest, we were shot at and gassed, and RPD had broken us up into 3 smaller groups across the intersection. To act out in this way, when the people are simply demanding justice for Daniel Prude, a man who was cruelly killed by Troy Talladay, Francisco Santiago, and Mark Vaughn, to me, this is reprehensible. There are a lot of people who believe that most police officers are good and only a few are bad, and that's where the problem comes down to, but it's beyond the people directly involved with the murder, because any officer who comes out night after night in full gear, ready to brutalize protesters who are unarmed, we have storage lids as shields and umbrellas. That's about as heavy as it gets for most of us. Whether it was Friday, Saturday last week, whether it was the group this morning ripping down the occupation in front of City Hall the way they did, every officer who does that is showing that not only do they approve of what Talladay, Santiago, and Vaughn did, they approve it so much that they are willing to come out and defend them for it. And so by now, this is going to account for hundreds of officers in the department. And that's not even counting the elected officials who are not taking responsibility for their part in their actions after the murder was revealed to them, in the cover-up for the rest of the city, and everything else. I don't think that the Rochester Police Department can be reformed. I think at this point, the only thing we can do to keep the city and its residents safe is to completely dismantle the Rochester Police Department and rebuild it into something that will actually serve the community and the people and their needs to keep them safe.
Michael McNulty.
And my name's Michael McNulty. I'm 70 years old. I live in Gobbs Hill Park, fortunately. I spent my entire life in the city of Rochester. The only comments I'd like to make are, I haven't kept as informed on this as I should. But the comments that I would like to make are a little more obscure. When I was 19 years old, I was certain, I had moral certainty that the President of the United States at the time, Lyndon Johnson, was an evil man. And I was absolutely opposed to Johnson. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that my certainty when I was 19 has become much more certain. And I think a lot of the language that's being used now, I just listened to Erica. Erica, I would love to put you in charge of the police department tomorrow. And I'd like to see what kind of job you could do. I think a lot of the language that's being used and so much of the certainty of the speakers needs to be tempered a bit. I think words that I've heard that are really offsetting to me are words like murder, lynching, don't really add to what needs to be done if you really want reform. Other than that, I'd like to talk just to address the urban-suburban divide in this county, which is huge, and I think it's getting wider and wider. And I think everybody that's involved in this process better be aware of this divide and do everything that we can to close this divide. And I think a lot of what's being done doesn't add to that. I think with this divide, this community, the city will never be able to grow again.
30 seconds.
That's it. Thank you.
Emily Daskewitz.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Sorry about not doing the video part. I'm just kind of new at this. It's actually my first time doing Zoom. I want to start out this, basically, I just have a bunch of questions, okay? Why are you punishing the Rochester Police Department? I'm almost 62 years old. I'm a lifelong Rochester resident. I've lived all over the city. I lived through the race riots in the 60s. I know people that were killed during them. I also want to know, you talk about what you've seen there, especially you, Mary Lupion. Have you watched the live video feeds from the nightly protests? Not the TV stations ones, but the ones posted on YouTube from the men and women who were at the front. While I watched the bottles being thrown at the police, the rocks being thrown at the police, before they shot off the pepper spray bullets, okay? Which, let me ask you all another question. Everybody that is watching this, remember if your family did something wrong, would you want to be blamed for it? Why has everybody got to blame everybody in the police department? Shame on all of you. Your parents taught you better. How come we don't hear anything about the other killings going on in our city? Over 30 men have been killed this year that have not been killed by law enforcement. Why aren't people speaking about this? Why is it just this one young man's murder? And I'm not saying Rochester Police Department is right. This whole situation was wrong. It was handled wrong, and it needs to be fixed, including the mayor and those of you in city council. I just don't understand why the mayor, the city council, and the protesters are ignoring the fact that the mayor reinstated the curfew on September 3rd, 2020. That is why RPD was saying it was an unlawful assembly, because there was an 11 p.m. curfew. There was not to be allowed gatherings of 50 people. Okay? That is unlawful. They had every right to stand up for the law. That's what they were doing. You all were breaking the law. I also want to know, who are you holding accountable for the defacing of the city hall? Who is paying for all this? Our Rochester Police Department, we love you. Stay strong. Rochester, we got to get our crap together and stand together as one. We've done it before, we can do it again. Stay safe. I'm done. Bye.
Alan Smerbak.
Hello, my name is Alan Smerbak. I'm a psychology professor at RIT. Working as a police officer is a powerful situational influence on behavior. Officers experience their job as adversarial. They spend a lot of time trying to catch people who don't want to be caught, so feeling a little us versus them is only natural. But for those officers to provide mental health checks means shifting out of this adversarial stance. So does confronting a suspect with a mental health problem, developmental disability, or sensory difference. But the same officer can't go from an adversarial stance day in, day out to suddenly become a social worker, which is why I'm advocating for more police functions to be shifted to non-police agencies. Behavior comes from a combination of the person and the situation. It's tempting to think that the cure for bad cops is good cops, that we can fix the problem by changing the people. But if cops are to police each other, they would have to go against the people who they rely on every day, which would take extraordinary strength of character. And that's precisely the problem. We as a community cannot rely on rare, extraordinary people. We have to change the situation. Situational problems call for structural changes. I attended the protest on Friday, September 9th. There were more than 1,000 people there. The police knew this. They had drones flying overhead. We planned to end our march at the Public Safety Building as per usual. We went west across the Court Street Bridge. About 2/3 of the marchers were on the bridge when we faced the police blockade. They announced they had declared our gathering unlawful and that we would disperse immediately or face arrest. We had to leave, but we were physically blockaded on 3 sides and blocked by hundreds of marchers on the other, since predictably many in the middle and the back of the march could not hear the announcement. After less than a minute, the officers began being aggressive. They started firing pepper balls at us, adding the sound of gunshots, panic, and temporarily blinding a few people. It was chaos. They created a significant and unnecessary risk that someone would be trampled, crushed, or pushed into the river. No reason was ever given for our gathering to be dispersed. But if they had to confront us, they didn't have to do it on the bridge. Any reasonable adult could see that what they did put civilian lives at risk unnecessarily. So how do they convince themselves it was necessary? It's that adversarial mentality, that us versus them. But them isn't just crime or even criminals. It is subtly morphed into anyone who opposes the police. And I don't think that's what every officer believes in their heart of hearts. But like I said, criticizing a fellow officer, disobeying an unjust order, that takes truly uncommon character. And uncommon things are by definition rare. We can't rely on them. Disrupting bad actors is vital, but we also have to make situational changes. Oh, and they're almost never wearing masks, seriously. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to what I have to say.
Jenna Lawson.
Jenna, you just have to unmute yourself. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yep.
Hi. Hi, my name is Jenna Lawson. I live in the city of Rochester, and I wanted to share my experiences as a peaceful protester. On September 5th, I was pepperballed and tear gassed 3 separate times before I was unable to breathe or see, to the point that I had to retreat to safety. I was hit in the upper thigh with a pepper ball, and my friend was shot by a pepper ball in the shoulder right in front of me. These did not ricochet from the ground, as is the procedure. My foot was trampled because the person in front of me was struck directly by a tear gas canister and leaped backwards, damaging the tendons in my right foot. And now I need physical therapy. My injuries are relatively minor, and I'm much luckier than many, including people who have broken bones or will lose eyeballs because of the disproportionate response of our PD. I have never in my life experienced greater fear for my safety than I did because of our PD officers. Their indiscriminate violence made me feel like they didn't even see us as human beings. I've never seen such blatant disregard for other people in my life. A woman in front of me was struck in the head by a pepper ball and passed out. We dragged her to the sidewalk and yelled for a medic, who was also struck by pepper balls as they were responding, even though they were clearly identified with red crosses all over their body. Limping home that night, police taunted and jeered at me and others heading for shelter. I will never forget that cruelty and lack of compassion as they saw us gasping, crying, and bleeding as we tried to make our way to safety. They saw this and they literally laughed at us. If tear gas violates the Geneva Convention, why would you deploy it against your own citizens and claim it to be in the name of safety? In what way is one person throwing a water bottle equivalent to or deserving of chemical warfare? If the objects were thrown by a few people, why would you respond by tear gassing thousands of peaceful protesters? Please stop allowing police staff to talk down to and evade the city council in their questions, saying you must not understand how it works or how it feels or what their tactics are. I believe in Rochester so much that I have to challenge it to do better. The existing system is so far removed from personal accountability that officers are emboldened to act with cruelty even now. End qualified immunity, fire and indict the officers responsible for Mr. Prude's death. Thank you.
Jay Poston.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure this is not easy, as I'm sure no matter what side people are on, they're not going to give you a lot of kudos this evening. Lifelong resident of Rochester, homeowner. I'm not really in tune with the protests. I haven't been. I'm not going to speak about that. I guess I want to speak to City Council about decision making, specifically, I guess, about this police station. I was kind of excited about it. I don't live that far from the area, so I thought it'd be nice to have community policing. That would be nice, but maybe I'm missing something. That's okay. My concern is the initial vote was 7-1 to have it. From what I understand, $500,000 was spent to buy the property, which has been vacant for a while, so I thought it would be nice. And then all of a sudden, we're not going to do it. Again, if we don't have the money to do it, that's one thing, but I think we're having a lot of knee-jerk reactions. I'm not sure what the decision-making process with the city council is right now. I've called my local city council, well, happens to be councilwoman, once last week, once this week to get some clarification on that. I've received no phone call back. One call last week and one this week. So I know you're not going to answer questions, but I guess my question would be, or comment would be, the decision-making is what's a concern to me. Obviously, I don't know what power you have over the police department. I've not had a problem with police, but obviously people have. And if there's something wrong, it needs to be fixed. And we should be judging them like we judge anyone else. But on the same side, it seems like the entire city council is very hostile against the RPD. Maybe rightfully so. But I would say, innocent until proven guilty. And if they need to be found guilty, we need to do that. So please move forward on that. But please, decision-making is a concern. We don't need another multi-million-dollar investment that we're going to cancel. So before, I know you already repealed it, but I would like to know more about the $500,000 we spent on it. Are there any contracts? That's my concern. But thank you for this evening's topics. Good luck.
Sarah Delphi.
Yes, hi. Hello, City Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. This tragedy upsets me to my core because, you see, I am a person living with a mental illness. I actually struggle with suicidal thoughts like Daniel Prude. For any human being to be put through what he went through is a crime, but especially for someone who isn't in their right mind and crying out for help. 1 in 5 people in America are living with a mental illness. So that means out of the 9 council members and myself, 2 people are living with mental illness. That's just reported, not to mention the many people who don't come forward for many reasons, but especially because of stigma. Now, there has been so much progress in regards to destigmatizing mental illness, but now with just this one situation, we as a society have lost some of that progress. This hurts my heart, and quite frankly, I hope it hurts yours enough so that many positive changes can come from this horrible tragedy. The two biggest ones being either the resignation or the firing of Mayor Lovely Warren. If it wasn't for for the sheer bravery of the Prude family, the community would have never known what happened. No thanks to Mayor Warren. She can't be trusted. Secondly, the arrest and prosecution of the police officers put on duty that night, or that were on duty that night for the murder of Daniel Prude. Lastly, I want to make sure that this never happens again. Thank you.
Annalisa Baron.
Of the police officers put on duty that night,
You just need to mute the video of the live stream playing on your device before you begin speaking.
I want to make sure that this never happens again. Thank you.
Annalisa Baron.
Hello, I'm Annalisa Baron. I am 32 years old, and I have been an instructor at the U of R and also at RIT right now. I decided to join this call. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of an echo.
You just need to mute the video.
Okay, I got it muted. I'm actually here to speak on behalf of Sonia McGaffigan, the student who was 19 from Alaska that spoke a little bit before me. I went to the protest on September 4th on a Friday. I've never been to a protest that I thought might be violent. And I was on the Court Street Bridge as well. It was a very terrifying experience, and I'm kind of still settling, if that makes sense. But I did, because of that response, feel like I should go back because it really seemed like beyond Daniel Prude, something was very wrong. And I was actually next to Sonia at the very beginning of the march on Saturday. Sonia came without a helmet on. She's a very strong young woman, but it was clear to me that she did not know what was possible for Saturday evening. I was actually one of the people that helped her find a helmet, and I tightened it myself. We tried to find her eye protection, but I just want to convey that when I saw her name in the news and when I kept on hearing that this was someone who was an outside agitator from Alaska, it just really seemed like a stretch. And so coupled with being like physically endangered and having for the first time like a real experience of terror, being stuck on that bridge, and then hearing that this 19-year-old student was now an outside agitator, just made me feel like I couldn't really believe anything coming out of there. And I have never been a person that had any kind of negative interactions with the police prior to this. And I really came to that protest on Friday because I just feel like if what happened to Daniel Prude happened to a family member of mine, I would really appreciate people marching through the streets for justice. And that's why I go, and that's why I'm there. But in what happened on Friday night, now I'm there for a totally different reason. I'm there because like I'm watching something that I should be able to do as an American be like physically attacked. These are huge groups of people. Maybe there are some people who throw things, but a lot of people are there just because it was something very wrong that happened. And I think that being in that position and then being shot at, just, it doesn't make you want to think, you know, like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to give the RPD a benefit of a doubt anymore. You know, I see my students out there, they're young people and they're very well-meaning. And a lot of them would never hurt anyone.
That's time.
So now I've gone several days in a row and I keep seeing the same thing happen. After the police respond with violence, the people who actually get physically hurt come back with a new kind of spirit.
Martin Hawk.
Hello. Hi. I'd like to thank the City Council for holding this forum. I think it's vital and I'm really appreciative. My name's Hawk. I'm a documentary filmmaker and city resident. I've covered the demonstration since May 30th and have been out almost every night since the horrific video of Daniel Prude's murder surfaced. That senseless and violent tragedy aside, I would like to address what I've witnessed as a documentary filmmaker in the days since. The context, I'm an observer, always complying with law enforcement and organizers alike, never agitating or even interacting. I'm silent in the field with my camera, acutely aware of everything going on in order to do my job. To be blunt, what I've witnessed these past 2 weeks has been nothing short of abject terror, carnage, and unwarranted brutalization. In no way am I exaggerating when I label how the RPD, Monroe County Sheriff's Department, and state troopers have conducted themselves as being rampant, belligerent, and on multiple occasions, vengeful. After capturing a violent arrest of a young Black woman in front of the public safety building and was screaming, "I can't breathe," as one of her 5 arresting officers held a knee on her upper spine, I walked away to do a battery change when an officer yelled, "A media badge isn't a free pass," and proceeded to shoot me 7 feet away in the base of the neck. The pepper ball split my neck open and the chemical agent seeped into the wound. I wasn't able to turn my head left for the next 6 days. My colleagues from national news outlets, captured protests in Portland, New York City, Kenosha, Minnesota, they've all told me that this department's response was by far the most grossly disproportionate to the level of aggression from the demonstrators. And when we describe the RPD's response to demonstrators, we're not talking about the defense of personnel, buildings, or in the case of City Hall today, the defense of the American flag. We're not talking about damage control or the dispersal of unlawful gatherings. The response I observed and captured on my camera from a department that should have been on their hands and knees begging for forgiveness from the people they were sworn to protect was instead a response of unmitigated aggression, violent military-grade tactics, and weaponry used on undergrads, nurses, construction workers, teachers, elderly clergy, men and women in wheelchairs holding umbrellas to shield themselves from chemical warfare. While the world has watched us with bated breath, this city's government and its law enforcement didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. The world has watched our broken government double down on the same inhumane practices that landed us on the world stage in the first place. I've captured people lost eyes, broken limbs, and many suffering from early stages of PTSD, including colleagues who work for local news that haven't been able to go out in the field because of what they've witnessed. We need an independent investigation into the details surrounding Daniel Prude's murder and the subsequent cover-up, and separately, an independent investigation into the atrocities our law enforcement committed following. I'd like to say that this is a watershed moment for our community, but unfortunately, we're past the precipice where we could have redeemed the sins of this government. We are past the point of any conceivable retribution. The only thing left is reckoning and independent investigation will bring. Thank you.
Sarah Kleiman.
Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to name that so far this evening, it has predominantly been a sea of white faces and voices. I'm a Rochester City resident. I'm also a licensed social worker and a board certified music therapist. I'm very passionate about trauma-informed crisis intervention. Throughout my career, I have de-escalated countless situations. Men, women, children with mental health issues, experiencing suicidal ideation, engaging in self-harm, under the influence of alcohol and other substances, humans impacted by and actively experiencing trauma, including men twice my size, making threats and brandishing weapons. I've never killed anyone. I've never physically harmed anyone. I don't think I've ever physically intervened at all. But I'm not special. My skill in this area is the direct result of education, training, and years of experience. And I know many other mental health professionals who can say the same. Without question, it is mental health professionals who should respond to people in crisis, to people like Daniel Prude. While I was initially pleased to see the city take some first steps in this direction, I must echo a Free the People Rock organizer who said that the $300,000 proposed to fund 24/7 mental health first responders is both laughable and disrespectful. Adequate, appropriate, comprehensive, trauma-informed crisis intervention requires legitimate funding. This is not a checkbox issue. We cannot check the box of expanding mental health responses to crisis calls without ensuring the scaffolding to both keep it going and to mitigate the likelihood that mental health first responders will quickly burn out and that these positions will succumb to continuous turnover. The city must allocate resources, money, not just now, but ongoing. There must be budget lines dedicated to these endeavors, not just now, but ongoing. Mental health first responders need access to adequate compensation and also continuing education and training. But it's also critical and essential that they receive appropriate and consistent clinical supervision. Clinical supervision is the ultimate mitigating factor between mental health providers on the front line and burnout. All of this costs money, and it requires fervent commitment by City Council, the Mayor's office, and all areas of city and county government, not just right now while there are protesters in the streets and national media attention, but for the foreseeable future. If it were your brother, your son, your father, today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, who would you want?
Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan.
Thank you. I'm Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan. I'm a Rochester City resident and I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. So my faith teaches me that all people are good and worthy of love and dignity. And we believe that the only hell that exists is the hell that we create for each other, all too easily here. So you've heard firsthand tonight and have among you firsthand experience of the disproportionate and violent response by Rochester police to protesters and to Black people over the last 70 years, if not 200. So I don't need to tell you about being tear gassed while in my clerical collar, while walking away from a line of police officers. I don't need to tell you about being with high schoolers from my church who had to flush chemical weapons out of their eyes, about holding the hands of a protester who was bleeding from her face after being hit with a canister. I don't need to tell you about people coming to me with confession and parents making me promise that I would tell their children that they loved them because they were so scared when they turned the corner with water bottles and Tupperware shields and found armored vehicles and dogs and police officers dressed for war. Didn't need to tell you any of that, but I'm a preacher, so I did. And you know the difference between protesters with water bottles and Tupperware shields and the militarized response that we saw from the police force. You're smart, capable people. You don't hold a position like yours unless you understand something about power. And I want to thank you for the decisions that you made yesterday, the thought processes that I see you all publicly working through when you shift your thinking away from what you thought wouldn't be possible and now suddenly is. And I want to encourage you to use everything in your power to continue to defund the police officers, not as individuals. We might even think about further funding the emotional and mental and spiritual support services for them. You had a psychologist tell you earlier about the levels of trauma that they live with and the ways in which defunding the police allows us to invest in our communities. The speaker 4 or 5 back, he was a little befuddled by what felt like a sea change. And that is an invitation, I think, to you. This need not be a temporary trend. Our moral imaginations make room for different possibilities. You all have seen the hell present among us. There's not a leader in this city, in your position or mine, who doesn't on a daily basis hold stories of pain and struggle that doesn't need to continue to happen. If hell's present among us, so too are glimpses of paradise. You have power among you, levers you can pull.
That's time.
Thank you.
Kevin Stewart.
We just got a notice that he is logging in now, so I'm going to wait a moment and see if he is in the waiting room. We can move on to the next person and go to Kevin after Leverett. I will get Leverett in the Zoom meeting right now.
Okay, Leverett Copeland.
Leverett, you can unmute yourself and begin whenever you're ready. I see that you're speaking, but we still can't hear you.
Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade, then neither persons or property will be safe. That was Frederick Douglass. My name is Leverett Copeland, a community guardian originally from Miami, Florida, who has been residing in the 14621 area of Rochester for 15 years. At the age of 8, I witnessed the 1980 riots in Miami, where I saw violence, looting, and rioting. Comparing that time with what I have witnessed in Rochester over the past several weeks, Rochester has had peaceful protest in comparison. I have personally been a victim of Rochester's Police Department's fear and conspiracy tactics. I have witnessed officers waving rifles and guns at unarmed citizens, spouting derogatory and controversial statements to citizens, and even confronted an officer with his knee on my then 13-year-old daughter's neck as he had a gun to her head. Our community has witnessed officers relishing confrontation and dominance. Refraining from harm, not out of fear, but out of concern for others, their well-being, and out of respect is nonviolence. That was the Dalai Lama. Meeting peaceful protesters with riot gear and military equipment is not refraining from harm. Being an African-American father who has been diagnosed with mental issues, I know my family is afraid for my welfare, but my struggle would not cease until my sons and my sons' sons can teach their sons how to live, unlike myself and my father and his father, who had to teach their sons how to survive. How to survive a system who systematically identifies me as a criminal, thug, or less because of my skin color, even though I have given blood, sweat, and tears serving this country. And to the officer who demanded an apology last week from this honorable city council for stating truth, where's the apology to Daniel Prude's family or to the citizens of Rochester? Where's the humanity to be cordial, or will the deceit and spread of fear continue? When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. That was Thomas Jefferson. It seems by the actions that Rochester Police Department wants the citizens to be frightened into respect. Nothing is more despicable than respect based on fear. Albert Camus. All the laws, protocols, and guidelines can be changed and reformed, but until the attitudes and conduct of Rochester Police Department change to where, regardless of color, socioeconomic status, or where a person lives, they feel protected and served, not degraded, harassed, and demoralized, the cycle of mistrust and animosity will continue. Thank you.
Kevin Stewart.
He is still not in the waiting room, so we can go on to Cynthia Dillard. She is joining.
Okay.
She is currently connecting to her audio. Cynthia, your time will begin whenever you start speaking. Cynthia, can you hear us? All right, let's go to the next person.
Donald Martell.
He is joining right now, and we will come back to Cynthia afterwards. Donald, you can begin whenever you're ready and your time will start.
Hi, can you hear me? So,
Yes.
First of all, thank you for letting me speak, Council. My name again is Donald Martell. I'm a city resident and I've been a local activist for a few years now. So I've been to all the protests so far and have experienced RPD's thuggish brutality firsthand every single day. 3 of my friends have been shot in the neck with the pepper balls or the face. We have documented evidence of all of that. All the documentation on my phone of RPD's thuggish nature and their complete brutality against their own citizens. Tear gas is outlawed by the United Nations, and yet we use it on our own citizens, and RPD just indiscriminately shoots it at people. Shot it at a journalist who got her nose broken, got her teeth broken, had to get surgery, I believe. So these are the things that we face as citizens. So tell me, if they see peaceful protesters as a threat, maybe these knuckle-dragging goons should find a new profession, because most of them live outside the city. 76% of them are white men, and most of them make a hell of a lot of money. And on top of that, they only solve 31.7% of robberies, 10.3% of burglaries, 11.4% of larcenies, 19.2% of motor vehicle thefts, and 34.8% of rapes. So why are we paying 713 sworn officers hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year to do nothing? We pay these clowns to ride around, sit around, and do nothing, while we have RCSD take 300 cuts, and $119 million every single year we send to RCSD, while we ask them to take more cuts. How come we're not cutting RPD's budget to funding our schools? How come we're not doing that? So this RPD's lack of respect, the us versus them mentality, it allows these officers to act in an unauthorized and over-aggressive way. And we see time and time again with this type of policing that it perpetuates the school to prison pipeline, keeps them filled, and allows the citizens of Rochester to keep being victims of their own poverty that the city helps perpetuate. So I want to see Daniel Prude's murderers get put in jail. I want to see you, council, vote immediately to vote no confidence in Lovely Warren and get her to resign, because it's time you stepped up that pressure, because her and the rest of the police department have covered this up, and her throwing everyone else under the bus before her is not quite enough. So all we're really asking for is to get less brutality in Rochester and to get innocent Black people to be treated like guilty white people, because a guilty white person is going to be taken to McDonald's after they shoot somebody. And we're asking innocent Black people just to be treated that way. And we want accountability too. Meanwhile, Mike Mazzio over there at the Locust Clan, who actually has a fascist logo. Look that up. They're a fascist organization. He needs to step down as well. And he says they want accountability, and that they oppose the Police Accountability Board every single turn. So I ask you, council, to fire and arrest the officers, vote no confidence in Lovely Warren, and defund the motherfucking police. Thank you.
Cynthia Dillard.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Dillard, and as a city resident all of my life, my heart is extremely heavy regarding the recent racial protests occurring around the country and now in my own city, in the neighborhood I grew up with, and in front of the church I used to attend as a child. But sadly, this isn't new. I believe there's a history of impropriety in the RPD, not just with African Americans and people of color, but in their response to mental health and domestic violence disputes. I was in high school in 1975 when Denise Hawkins lost her life when officers responded to a domestic dispute, and so did Alicia McCullough in 1983. Patricia Thompson was shot in her home by an officer in 2006, responding to a mental health call. This one-size-fits-all of procedures should change immediately. And any statement that includes the words, officers were following procedures, shows a callousness by the RPD officials. My heart goes out to Daniel Prude and his family, but he's not the first. But you can make certain he will be the last. Thank you.
Kevin Stewart.
Kevin, you just have to unmute yourself and then you can begin speaking. Kevin, we still can't hear you. Nope, we still can't hear you. There you go.
Yes, cool.
Yep.
I think you and I clicked the button at the same time. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on the technical difficulties. I want to start tonight by discussing something that Vice President Lightfoot has discussed, and I believe he worded it as a breach of trust. I think that remark gets us close to where we're on the same page, but I look at things a little bit differently. I see where we're heading as a city and as a society trending towards the consent of the governed issue. We are losing faith in the institutions that we have all agreed on to set the rules of our society. We've heard several people talk about this tonight. We've heard about the police. We've heard about the mayor's office. We've heard about this body of the city council. And as we continue to see the oppression of protesters, as we continue to see people brutalized in the streets, the mayor actively using taxpayer funds to cover up a homicide that was ruled back in March by the coroner's report. President Scott, I understand that was reported back to you on August 20th as a overdose, and I can only imagine how upset you were when you realized that you had been lied to by the mayor. But again, it brings to my mind a question of the consent of the governed and why we should have faith in this body when you were lied to by the mayor regarding the issue of this man's death, and yet we are still seeing Mayor Lovely Warren in the office. Councilman Payo has noted that he's concerned about the flags that are flying in front of City Hall, and he's concerned about people speeding down Lake Avenue. I ask him and all the other council members and everybody in the city why the people of our city should be expected to respect traffic laws when we are having our tax dollars being used to kill our neighbors, to actively conceal these homicides, and then to brutalize thousands of people in the streets as we try to exercise our First Amendment right in protest. Again, I say try to exercise our First Amendment right because as we've continually showed up peacefully in the streets, we've been violently repelled by paramilitary tactics that have been discussed ad nauseum. So I'll skip that section of my sort of prepared statements here. Again, the police have been guilty over the past several weeks, over the past several months, potentially over the past several years. I know the ACLU is doing some digging into some of the longer length police violations. And I encourage this body to join the people that have listed their demands very clearly. I join everybody in applauding this effort to listen, and yet I question where the listening has been for the past several months when the demands have been clearly stated. I'm going to close my comments with a quote because Mr. Patterson, who's my councilman, has referenced this body and himself as deliberative, contemplative. So I'll leave you with this remark, and I hope that you will all contemplate it and deliberate it. The quote is, when you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And I ask you all to please join us in making it a peaceful revolution. Thank you.
Tiffany Becca.
She did not join the waiting room.
Sam Jett.
They also did not join the waiting room.
Dave Bowyer, I'm sorry. Boyer.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I want to thank you. My name is David Boyer. I've been living in the city well over 35 years. I have a good relationship with City Hall going back to Mayor Thomas Ryan. So I want to thank President Loretta Scott and Rochester City Council for this opportunity. And of course, we're all here because of we're mourning the death of Daniel T. Prude, who died March 23rd, 2020 at 3:23 in the morning by RPD on Jefferson Avenue. And why did it take so long to find out the details in September? I want to say if you're going to categorize what I'm about to tell you, let me use the word aftermath, that I do a lot of community journalism, and I want to show you what I saw in terms of photography. And this is in terms of the pepper bullets, and here are pepper bullets. So you're asking, why does David Boyer have these pepper bullets? How did he get them? These things are left behind. These things are just left on the sidewalk for any kid, any dog to just walk over. I mean, did you know that? This stuff is just left behind in terms of aftermath. Let me show you some stuff that I did see. I took this picture the morning of September 6th, and there's a pepper bullet with the powder right there on the sidewalk, ready for any kid, any dog paw to touch. You talk about some of the pepper bullets being launched at buildings. Here is a garage where the pepper bullet was literally aimed at the second story of the building. And this is what I saw. And it just concerns me greatly. I want to reiterate what Martin Houck said, a journalist earlier, that the city is in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of big trouble right now, and we're on the world stage. And we have to admit it, and we have to take care of it. And what I hope is that all sides, all leaders of all sides, need to come together at the same Zoom moment. And even though they are diverse, they still need to get together and talk, because we are in really great trouble right now. We have to own it, we have to say it, and we have to work together.
30 seconds.
Zoom fashion. So I just hope also that some of the peaceful protests continue, but continue peacefully without any kind of graffiti damage to buildings and things like that. Thank you very much.
Lisa Lance.
Lisa did not join the waiting room.
Tony Clark.
Tony has been let in and they are connecting to audio, but they do not seem to be at their computer. Oh, there they are. Whenever you're ready, Tony, you can unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Hi, I'm Tony Clark. We are living in times of great uncertainty, and with everything in our society in a state of flux, many of us are feeling insecure, confused, and full of fear. In such precarious times, it's natural to see a rise in incidences of violence, substance abuse, and mental health crises as the mounting uncertainty increases the pressure that we're all feeling in this present moment. As an undercurrent of fear continues to surge through our society and across our planet, many of the weaknesses within ourselves and within our cultures are becoming more evident. Now more than ever, we need to feel safe and secure. The people of Rochester are no different. We want to feel safe, and we deserve to feel safe. Incidences like the death of Daniel Prude only exacerbate the feelings of fear that we all face. When the police are supposed to protect you, are harming the people that they are sworn to protect, no one can experience the peaceful enjoyment of their own city. We need something to improve relations between the police and the people of the city. We need to see right action in order for us to feel like we can trust the police again. Where I used to live in Cortland, New York, there's a program called the Crisis Intervention Team, formerly the Emotionally Disturbed Person Response Team. Due to inadequate training and education of police officers, there were a number of incidences of police beating and harming people who were not violent or resisting arrest, but were suffering from a mental health condition the officers were ill-trained to handle. Institution of the CIT program has reduced the amount of incidences of police brutality against people who are emotionally disturbed, helping officers to feel more equipped to handle situations like these, as well as improving community relations between officers and the people they are sworn to protect. I feel like a similar program could help our community.
Next, we have Molly Snell Larch.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to the council for holding this listening session. I would urge you to check out the YouTube comments on the channel. I think you're missing the opportunity to hear folks sort of silently support different comments as they would in the actual meeting. I don't have a ton to add to what other folks are saying, except that, you know, I demand the firing prosecution of Mark Vaughn, Francisco Santiago, and Troy Talladay, the murderers of Daniel Prude. You know, communities that are the safest don't have the most police. They have the most resources. And I just think at the end of the day, Angela Davis said it best, if I can find the quote that I looked up for this moment. You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. I think this is a moment for all of us to act that way and believe that we can make a change and build a world that we can imagine, not a world that we can see today. So thank you so much for your time and attention today, and have a great night.
Is Jacob Gronemeyer in the waiting room?
No, they are not.
Sarah St. Cloud. Thank you.
They are also not in the waiting room.
Antoinette Cunningham.
They are also not in the waiting room.
Dewan Tarver.
They are also not in the waiting room.
Mary Lou W. Anderson.
I will let her in now.
Thank you.
Mary Lou W. Anderson, you can begin your comments once you've unmuted yourself.
Did that work? Hello?
Yep, you can begin.
How come I can't see any of you? I haven't done this before. I don't see any people. Am I supposed to be able to see you?
You might need to hit gallery view, but we can still hear you, so you can begin your comments if you are ready.
Okay. I spent an hour and a half trying to figure out how to use this. And I'm not stupid, but I couldn't figure out how to use this. So there is no gallery view in front of me here. I don't know what this does. Switch to gallery view. How's that? Hi. Man, I didn't feel that old until today. Now I feel, 96. I'm 69. So I have 2 minutes and 45 seconds left, something like that. Is that right? Can someone say something?
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, it took me that long. They told me 7, so I fed my dog. Sorry. I didn't hear any of the rest of the meeting because all the pages I went to, I couldn't hear the sound. So I guess I'll just say what I would have said last night. That's when I was originally going to come. I'm a minister and a teacher. I'm a mother. I'm a Red Cross instructor. I've been mostly living in the city for 45 years, just a little outside right now. But I need to say about what I saw because I watch things. When they're awful, I still watch them. I think as a pastor, I was with a lot of people who were dying and a lot of people who were ill and people who've had family members overdose. And I just want to say it's, other people might not appreciate this, but Judeo-Christian background, and I think also Islamic and stuff. The breath of life is sacred. Ruah Elohim is the breath of life, the spirit of life, the wind of life. And it's the same word in Greek. Pneuma also means breath, wind, and spirit. To press the spirit, I'll try not to cry, but to press the spirit out of someone's body, you murder them. And I have watched that tape many times. I've also watched George Floyd. I've dealt with people with overdoses and drug problems. I have over 30 years sobriety because my own father died from alcoholism. And I saw a man needing help. I saw a man who was punished for needing help. And then I saw them push down on his head and his back and hold his feet in place until all the air was gone. And then when he threw up, I heard it. The head person. What?
30 seconds.
I'll try. The head person say, "Oh, are you throwing up, my man?" And then he looked for a pulse. And when there was still a pulse, he pressed down more until it was gone. And I know we need different things, teams of people who help people, but that was murder. And I do not understand why that person is not charged with murder. And I lived in this city a long time. I've never seen anything as horrifying as that. He was sick, he was mentally ill, he needed help. There, that's probably all I have time to say.
That's time.
Yeah, sorry. Got a lot of background, but there's no time to say it here. Bye-bye.
Heather Milligan.
Good evening, council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you all directly. First, let me say that I wholeheartedly support all of the demands by Free the People Rock and the protesters that we've seen every day in our city. I want to just focus on one of those demands: defund the police. This is going to require bold thinking, but it's crucial for the safety and well-being of our community. Defunding is not just moving small amounts of money from the PD. Defunding is significantly lessening both the role and the power that police have in our city. I urge you not to just consider small police reforms. Instead, we must reimagine what our community could be like if we no longer rely on the police. For this, we must have robust mental health and wellness services. $16 million was, I believe, the cost of the substation that thankfully you've rescinded. I understand the money was to be borrowed for the substation. If we could borrow the money for the substation, let us instead borrow the money for mental health services, as well as wellness and prevention programs. This is an investment in our community. Someone said earlier that the safest communities are the ones with the most resources, not the ones with the most police. Police are not to be trusted with human lives. Many others tonight have already recounted the brutalities that have been inflicted on our neighbors, loved ones, and protesters. Our PD's treatment of Daniel Prude was not an isolated incident. The police have been inflicting trauma on people of color for decades. To make our community safer, we need less police presence, and the RPD must not hold so much power. To improve our community, we must focus on preventative efforts and not just reactionary measures. I urge you all to use your positions, not just to change policy at the city level, but to advocate for bold changes at the county and state levels as well. Since I have a little bit of time left, I guess I'll just say that last week, Free the People Rock held a town hall re-envisioning policing in our community, and I would strongly urge and ask all of you to watch this. Thank you so much for listening.
Shane Dreffield.
They are not in the waiting room.
Jonathan Hammond.
They are also not in the waiting room.
Matthias Leilos,
I am admitting them now. You can begin your comments whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you all hear me? It's Matthias Lalise. Thank you first for holding this space for us. And I want to commend you and thank you for the many important actions that you took last night, rolling back the $16 million of our community's money that was going to be spent on expanding police incomprehensibly at a time like this. I want to thank you for engaging in a collaborative process with the Rochester Housing Authority to expand access to affordable housing in Rochester. I think these are very important steps in the direction of improvement. But I ask myself a simple question: why are we here? Obviously, to state the obvious, we're here for Daniel Prue. We're here to stand in solidarity with him, with his family who've given such powerful testimony during the recent protests. But I ask myself again, why does change take so long? Not just in this city, but in this country. It's 57 years ago that Martin Luther King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and spoke about police brutality. He said, "We will not be satisfied while Black Americans are still subjected to the brutality of police in this country." Trayvon Martin, 2012, killed by a self-styled cop. Rodney King, 1992 in California, set off an enormous movement, national movement, after being brutalized by police. George Floyd now sparked a similar national movement. Now, here we are in Rochester with, again, the brutal death of another African-American man in this nation, and we're only talking about this now. Now, we had an opportunity, even knowing exactly what happened with George Floyd, to redirect policing policy in this city. And those were the budget deliberations. And I was disappointed by those budget deliberations, not because of the actions of the people, but because of the actions of this city council. The city council voted on a budget, and I commend you for promising, as part of that process, to engage in a thorough review of the police department and begin to implement the vision of this community in terms of policing. I was disappointed by the measly cuts that were made to the police budget. I was puzzled and flabbergasted by the fact that you cut into the most important part of the policing budget, which is community relations. Now, the people of Rochester have been demanding for a very long time that this kind of change happen, okay? The evidence is all around us. The Police Accountability Board was voted in by an enormous margin. And that policy, which you went to the people and you asked them, do you approve of this policy? That policy is one of the boldest in America. I know of no other example like it. It is unique. During the budget deliberations, everyone who spoke,
Your time is up.
One of two things.
Tabor.
Very quickly, one of two things. Demanded investment in our community programs, demanded cutting the police budget by 50%. Now, that is a modest ask. Let me tell you why. In Rochester, we have a community that is wildly over-policed. We have 2 times more police officers per person.
Again, your time is up.
Of our size. Now,
Tabor.
I am calling on you, along with this community, to implement the bold vision. I am echoing things that much of the community has said. Free the People has said it. People who have made those same demands.
We are going to go to Sam Jett, who I believe is joining us now.
Okay.
Sam, you can begin your comments whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for hosting this and for listening. So the people of Rochester all deserve a pristine and wild environment, the highest quality of education, consensus-driven government, access to all the technological and scientific innovations out there, human-centric healthcare, true and restorative justice, common and basic morality among peers, exceptional quality of life, healthy, accessible food, honestly, a lot of fun and sustainability in all things. People of Rochester in general deserve a better future, but achieving any of that cannot come before achieving justice for Daniel Prude. The leaders of Black Lives Matter movement in Rochester have made it clear that swift and radical changes are needed to confront justice for Daniel. And the sound changed, so I don't know if you can still hear me, but hopefully you can. I'll just keep going. You can hear me? Okay, thanks. The leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement in Rochester have made it clear that swift and radical changes are needed to confront justice for Daniel. And I think it goes to show that the same is true for all of the broken systems which have led us to where we are today. Fastly approaching a dead-end election at the crux of a veritable impending global catastrophe in the form of climate change or war, and submerged in the type of racism that leaves innocent Black people dead in our streets and mass murdering white people protected by the police. But I do believe that Rochester can be a seat of change, not only for ourselves, but possibly even for the rest of the world. With that in mind, I encourage the City Council and all of the leaders in Rochester, including the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, to consider adopting additional demands once justice for Daniel Prude has been secured. My suggestion today, which could be one of many, and one of many that citizens in Rochester and leaders will come up with that everyone should listen to, is that leaders across business, government, and social movements in Rochester demand something like leading companies in America who have all placed all of our lives on the line during their insatiable quest for greed, establish reparations by creating community-owned and led branches of their businesses here in Rochester, that these businesses could be equipped to be capable of developing all aspects of the future that we deserve instead of the toxic and profit-driven reality that we've been subjected to. Incentives for businesses to do this are potentially limitless in my mind, but at the very least, they could be offered
30 seconds.
A place in one of what could be the most secure and safest places in the world as our climate continues to change. And the people of Rochester are incredible, and the world would see that and is right now. I believe that this is something that we can demand, and I think the politically established should look to those in the movement who've been putting their ideas out there and follow in their footsteps. I do fear that this kind of request could be met with the same cold indifference that I've seen on the faces of police officers, heavily armed, standing in front of their communities while they're being begged to disarm themselves. Thank you. But I think hopefully still a chance.
Jennifer Gohane.
Jennifer, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but you just need to connect your microphone so that you can begin your comments. I will chat her as well. Oh, there you go. You just need to unmute and then you can begin your comments. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but you just need to connect your microphone so that you can begin your comments.
Are we here? Can you hear me?
Chat her as well. Yep, just make sure that you also turn off the live stream that you're listening to.
Okay.
There you go. You just need to unmute and then you can begin your comments.
Okay. I'm not mute now?
You can begin.
Sorry? Am I on?
Yep, you can begin your comments.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, President Scott and council members. what I see in Daniel Prude's treatment is a sick culture at work. The officers who responded to that call in March didn't know how to treat a person humanely, and their actions were part of a disease that's rampant through policing in this country. Demonstrators on our streets got a taste of that disease as well. It's a disease of unaccountability and being above the law. The very people responsible for keeping the peace believe they have license to run roughshod over it, act with callous indifference to human dignity and human worth. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing it on the streets. We saw it in the murder of Daniel Prude. I'm sorry if people object to the word murder. I don't think they set out to murder him. I'm really not sure they cared. I would like to see some thought given to what you do with a sick police body. Remedies are being proposed and you're starting to put them into practice, and this is really encouraging to see. You're talking about or beginning to particular abusive practices and weapons that have been used on the citizenry, redirecting resources from the police department to social service programs, diverting mental health calls from RPD. These are solid moves. The thing is, the police will still be there. What are we going to do about the sickness that is at the heart of policing in this country and in this city? I lived for a couple of years in Ireland, and Ireland has a really different ethic about policing. It's more similar to the friendly neighborhood. And they have their share of troubled souls and drug use and domestic difficulties and lost kids and so on. The police there seem prepared to deal with different problems in different ways and to start with a premise of humanity. So it's not in the nature of policing to be brutal.
30 seconds.
Police officers, sorry?
30 seconds.
Thank you. So culture can't change unless it wants to. Culture changes only under pressure. The pressure is only going to come from outside, and that means unrelenting attention from local government, holding police to account every single time, making it uncomfortable to be an abusive cop, and challenging the Blue Lives Matter narrative that pretends police have the deadliest job and are always right and everyone needs to be so grateful even when police behave badly. Just have to keep up the pressure until they change and not accept the bad apple idea. The fact is, a bad apple spoils the whole barrel. Get the bad apples out.
Monica Love,
They are not in the waiting room.
Mary Miskell,
She informed us earlier she cannot come, so I believe the next participant is Patricia Williams McGee. She's entering right now.
is Greta new? Is she there? Or no?
No, she is not. Patricia, can you hear us? You can begin your comments whenever you're ready. Patricia, you can just unmute yourself and then begin your 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good evening, City Council members and everyone listening on this live stream. I would like to let you know that my name. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, you just need to mute the live stream that you're watching.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Let me do that. Oh, just a minute. I'm doing that now. Technology, I tell you. Okay, how's that sound? Is that better?
That's
Or-
better. Nope, you're good. You can begin your 3 minutes.
Okay, excellent. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not in a good position. I want you to be able to see me. Hold on a second. Let me position myself. Can you see me better now? Is that better? Hello?
You're good.
Okay, great. Good evening, City Council members, and everyone listening to this live stream chat this evening. My name is Patricia Williams McGahee. I am a 30-year Rochester resident. I'm a native New Yorker. I wanted to say I have 2 issues, and I'll go through it quick, but I brought both of these issues to City Council around a year ago. And most members, in my view, City Council members, except for Vice President Willie Lightfoot and Council Member Malik Evans, either ignored, downplayed, dismissed, or diminished in some way the 2 very important issues that I'm going to present to you this evening that are very life-threatening and are life and death community concerns. The first is the 25,000 lead pipes that we have in our city. The community has not been informed that they are drinking water out of lead pipes. Those lead pipes may be bringing lead water into their homes, and they're ingesting poison. It is the responsibility of the city of Rochester to inform their citizens of this. And I've rung the alarm, 911, before, a year ago. And in that time, people have been drinking lead water. So there has been injury and poison to a number of people that are unknowing that they're drinking lead water out of these 25,000 lead pipes. But I have another issue that I'd like to bring up. The other issue that I brought up last year was the University of Rochester Medical Center, Strong Memorial Hospital, and the medical atrocities that they are engaging in. The Black experimentation that is going on, the racism and inequity in healthcare that is going on. They killed my father. You think about George Floyd and Daniel Prude and the issues surrounding police brutality and killing Black men. This is my father. This is my father, George W. Williams Jr. Can you see him? I'm hoping you can see his picture. He is a professional. He was a professional, but they killed him. They tortured him for over 14 months. They guinea pig tested on him and treated him inhumanely. He had a neurocognitive disorder where they treated him as if he was disposable and diminished his life as if he wasn't even human. I want and demand that the Rochester City Council address this issue regarding the University of Rochester. Now they have funding to do more guinea pig testing in order to be able to find this coronavirus. And they've gotten that from the government. And also connect the dots with Kodak and that $275 million that they're creating this new pharmaceutical plant to create these medications and pharmaceutical meds in order to distribute throughout the country. And Trump is a part of that, so you know it's crooked. Their money, power, and influence makes them think that they are above the law. They are not above the law. They don't run Rochester. The people run Rochester. And we're coming for you, University of Rochester Medical Center. I will not stop until you are held accountable for killing George W. Williams Jr. and the many other people that are suffering and tortured by your atrocities, your hatred, your systematic institutional racism, and the other atrocities that you are doing there in that hospital and have been since the inception of your organization. Thank you very much.
Mary Ellen Belding.
She is not in the waiting room.
Mary Beth Elko?
She is joining now.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members. Thank you for those of you that are still paying close attention, because those of us at the end still have a lot to say, so much appreciated. My family and I have been residents of Rochester for 4 years. We moved here from Syracuse. And so I was quickly, joined in campaigning, and then I joined in for the Police Accountability Board. So I didn't even take time before just jumping in. So this is my second time speaking to you. The last time was maybe 2019. So I just want to touch on a couple things. So much of what I was going to say has been said, so it's shifted a bit. So I'm here with regard to one demand from Free the People. And I'm here as someone who's been protesting from the streets, from home, in emails and phone calls and all the ways. So I'm aware of what's been going on, but many people have spoken to that. So my focus right now is many of us white people, myself particularly, is really, I'm waking up to the truth about policing in this country. And so when it hit what I now call home, okay, grew up in Syracuse, but now here, when it hit home, I couldn't help but understand so clearly now that everything happening right now is directly connected to history, direct connection to history. And so I said this in 2019, I say it again, like, history is being made. And I just wonder, like, which side, truly, as we chant in the streets, which side are you on? So much has been presented tonight, and you have so much else in your hands. My one point to the demands is defunding. This has been spoken to already, but the time for reforms is over. They don't work. The time for big change is right now. It's in your hands. It's literally in your hands. And so as we are all learning and unlearning what is happening, what happened to Daniel Prude, it is not anything new. It's nothing new. There's been no time in history, if you can point me in the direction, please, there's no time in history when police have been here in this city or this country to protect people of color. Go back through the pages and find one time when they were ever here to protect communities of color. And you can see it through every single event that has occurred historically and today. So my point is, we need to look boldly at defunding. First, people need to learn what that means. I know you know what that means. And what do we need to do to defund, not reform? What has happened to Daniel Prude and countless other people in this community is baked into the system. It's baked into the Rochester Police Department, the culture in the training, the culture. You cannot change culture by reform. You need to change culture by, like, completely, even take reform to abolish, right? We need to, this community is amazing. If you were out there and you've been paying attention, this community has everything it needs to protect.
Your time is up.
The community. Thank you.
Katie Adamus.
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me. It's Katie Adamitas. Nice to see you. Thanks for the waves. I think everybody in the chat's making sure everybody's still alert here with City Council. So thanks for the time. I'm the chair of the National Lawyers Guild Rochester chapter. For those of you who may not be familiar with the National Lawyers Guild, we have a mission to advance human rights over property interests. And we do that a number of ways. And here in Rochester, we do that in particular with our Legal Observer program, our post-arrest support hotline. And I'm here to share with you my experiences with the Rochester Police Department. I won't repeat the demands made by Free the People or other commenters today, but certainly my comments speak to the need for police accountability here. And it is worth noting that the National Lawyers Guild Rochester chapter sits on the Police Accountability Board Alliance. We have experienced the Rochester Police Department targeting legal observers in our program. Legal observers are clearly marked with a neon green hat, which is trademarked, with black lettering that says National Lawyers Guild Legal Observer. We're in a role where we are taking notes on police conduct supervised by attorneys. I myself am an attorney. You can often see me out there. Some of us were arrested in July. My arresting officer was Troy Talladay, one of the officers who killed Daniel Prude. Troy Talladay was allowed to continue policing. Troy Talladay was allowed to continue making arrests. Troy Talladay was allowed to put his hands on my body. I also overheard him complaining to his colleagues about a pepper ball training in the morning. I would later be hit in the neck with one of those pepper balls at a subsequent protest. One of my fellow legal observers was hit in the jaw. When I say targeting, I don't mean incidentally arrested. I mean, I walked a line of officers, 14 of 19 covering their names. And then I was singled out, pointed to before I was arrested by a commanding officer who said, "She's under arrest." On other protest evenings, I've seen both my fellow legal observers and for myself, officers point their flashlights directly at us, point their weapons directly at us, to gesture to one another who we are. I've even tested my own assumption about this by slowly pacing to see if the beam of light or the end of the weapon follows my path, and it does. The Rochester Police Department needs to be held accountable. We're targeting legal observers who are in the street to protect civil and human rights, to make sure somebody is a trained witness, to bear witness when it's one person's word against the police. We had a fact discrepancy cited earlier in this meeting about what kind of force is being used. Are there rubber bullets? Aren't there rubber bullets? I've collected some pepper balls myself. These kinds of issues come up. We're an all volunteer run organization. We're here because we want to be part of supporting our community. Rochester Police Department ought to let us do that. And we hope that City Council will hear the demands being made by Free the People, will hear the demands being made by the community to hold the police accountable, demilitarize, defund. We have been exposed to force. We had some comments earlier about the long-range acoustic devices. I'm in a position of having to research and purchase protective equipment for volunteers. We've reached an extreme point. And so I'm very pleased that you've offered a forum to listen, and I hope to see that your listening is followed with action. Thank you.
Jennifer Bannister.
She did not join the waiting room yet.
Okay, Zachary Sarkis.
Greetings, thank you. Just want to say that I'm humble and grateful to witness the incredible community building that has been growing around Free the People Rock. This is an incredible coalition of Black female leaders, Black queer leaders, Black trans leaders, Black children, Black men who are finding their voice and standing up in the face of really what I can only imagine has been generations of trauma and extreme force. I think these past couple of weeks have really shed light on something that only one who's being shot at, who is witnessing people being wounded day in, day out, can actually have some sense of physical trauma, some sense of visceral trauma of that which communities of color have been experiencing for decades through the policing across this country. And we really stand at a pivotal moment. It's a revolutionary moment. And I think that really, first and foremost, I hope that we can continue to lift the voices that are at the forefront of this peaceful community organization that is educating, that is approaching the streets, even in its grief, with joy, with community engagement, with feeding, these things that are so essential in the roots of community development and building. So when we're talking about the violence that is being experienced through interacting with the paramilitary that is the Rochester Police Department, we must see the backdrop that this isn't some malicious group of people that are out here trying to cause trouble. This is literally people who are trying to educate about basic rights, that are trying to engage community and envision something that is beyond that which has failed. And I think that is really, really essential to point out that there is a very strong group of community leaders who are impressive out every single night, speaking words of truth and bringing people together in the best of ways and really holding a tight container for something that could be chaos. Now, that is a complete, I'd say, difference than what we've seen as peaceful protesters. For the Friday and Saturday night, almost 2 weeks ago now, I myself joined a multitude of citizens of Rochester walking peacefully for 4 miles before we were stopped on a bridge. Now, as I was approaching this bridge, I'm surrounded by Black families, probably 4 generations, from children to parents to elders. Let's say a quarter of the way away from the front of the line and having no idea what's going on. I hear a call of action for, umbrellas, and it's like, oh, what does that even mean? And within 30 seconds, we're bombarded. I see people running, stampeding. I see at the forefront of this, a man in a wheelchair who's stuck because he's being so bombarded by bullets. So questions I have is, how much money have we spent on this as a community? Right now, there's hundreds of officers getting ready for another nonviolent night. Hundreds of Rochester Police Department cars that are running and emitting emissions that cost money, gas payer money. And I just want to say, it's like, no chemical weapons, no LRAD, and no tanks. We have not even mentioned the tanks that were brought out in a neighborhood, about a week back that is unprovoked. So it's extensive. I can't repeat all the great things that have been said. And again, I think if anything, please continue to consider how to lift up the voices that are at the forefront of the Free the People movement. Thank you.
Evans Close.
Hello, I'm a Rochester resident, born and raised. I'm also a licensed psychotherapist with a long history of social work and experience working with the police. I don't believe that police are generally helpful in most responses and often they have a negative net effect when it comes to public safety, as has been the case with recent responses to protests. I honestly believe that if a mental health professional had responded to Daniel Prude's case, he would have been alive still today. I fully support any and all efforts to defund the police budget and working to build and expand community programs, mental health services, and schools. I'm really glad that you've decided to reverse your decision on the police substation in my district and that you're expanding mental health response services, though honestly, we need much more. I encourage you to listen to the community leaders, to our protesting youth, and to the people who have been pushing for police accountability and transparency. I believe that Rochester is currently in a crisis. This is an opportunity for real systemic change. I hope that moving forward is not returning to the status quo because our normal did not serve everyone. Real reform or reimagining takes courage that our community has shown it has and now calls on from you. In order to move forward, we need to arrest the officers involved in Daniel Prude's murder, end qualified immunity, drop all charges against the protesters, ensure that there is complete transparency with all follow-up. Each day that goes by during the protests only reveals more examples of police escalation, disdain for its citizens, and denial of facts. How can we be asked to trust that system when nothing is holding it accountable? Mayor Warren has said that she wants transparency, yet she has been holding private press events with select media and doesn't answer questions at press conferences. She needs to be held accountable for whatever part she has played and for not stopping the police violence against protesters. Please also push for a different police chief, as Mr. Simmons was involved in the cover-up, urging that the video of Mr. Prude's murder not be released. The current choice for chief makes me have even less confidence in the mayor. Again, please increase funding towards education and community programs and work towards defunding the police. Thank you for your time.
Shane Dryfield.
Shane, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, sorry. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to kind of reiterate a lot of the thoughts tonight, but I really want to actually speak to some of the antecedents of these violent crimes and speak to some of the needs of our city in kind of broad strokes. So please forgive me for that. Because we really need accountability for our city, from its police and its leaders right now. Daniel Pruitt is an example of how we have failed as a society and city to meet the socioeconomic and social emotional needs of our most vulnerable citizens. And I call on you as lawmakers to recognize our common humanity and mutual interest in lifting up the hurt and historically downtrodden people of Rochester and cities in America in general. There's a lot of blame shifting occurring these last few weeks, but really it's ultimately your responsibility and job to serve and solve our society's ills as elected officials. I call on you leaders to reallocate funds for this militarized RPD and to reinvest in RCSD and social capital. Segregation right now is arguably just as bad today than it was in the 1960s when it was legal, and is now done with disguised policy and neglect. Income segregation, which is meaningfully done, and also a result of educational segregation, and also housing segregation, and even nutritional segregation. A few years ago, I worked at a charter school in the city on Hart Street, where a very limited curriculum led an English class to discussion about social reform. One student's vision of a great society was one where there was gas stations on every corner where they could eat, where they get most of their meals from. And as a community, we need to prioritize social capital in our neighborhoods that need it. Libraries, parks, community organizations, prevention specialists, social workers, and teachers. Education, not police. So as leaders, you need to prioritize rehabilitation and not incarceration and violence. I'm not sure how we can justify in 2020 the arrest of people that are peaceful protesters so officials can get in a doorway to go to work. But there are no arrests or justice for a man that is killed on camera for the whole city and the world to see. In closing, I really implore you to request Governor Andrew Cuomo to intervene and remove Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren from office because she's proven incapable of managing the safety and progress of our city. We need immediate action to remedy the situation before it's too late. Police murder is a tragedy, and the City Hall cover-up is a further tragedy. And it undermines the trust and accountability that we need in government. So arrest the officers that killed Daniel Pruitt, Troy Dalladay, Mark Vaughn, and Francisco Santiago, oust Lovely Warren, pressure Adam Bello to solve the underlying issues of these problems, instead of letting the RPD meet the people with tear gas, rubber bullets, and blunt force. Because the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable citizens. Thank you for your time.
Tabor Bakovic.
You just need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, hello, good evening, City Council. I've been a resident for about 50 years, so I've seen a lot and I've heard a lot in this city, did a lot. And I just like to say the things that are going on are insane. And I've listened to a couple of these speakers, and the level of hate towards law and order, police is disturbing. This is not a sign of a progressing society. I'm going to say to these people, there's a reason why we have the police. It's not because people are initially good. It's people have a capacity for evil. And I like to say, I did see the video of police brutality, and it is disturbing. And I want to say that the police needs to be held accountable, and they will be. And I would also like to say, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. These anarchists, these people that are causing mayhem, they need to be held accountable. These people that are defacing public property, destroying and looting, they need to be held accountable. It's not right what they're doing. There's a reason why we have the police. This morning I was driving to work and I seen two signs. It said, "Blue lives don't matter. A good cop is a dead cop." This is not a sign of a civil society. This is a sign of a society that's in decay. Again, I say we need more police, not less. And this crazy hysteria to defund the police is insane. Look what's going on in New York City. There isn't less crime, there's more crime. And lastly, I want to say, I'm in the process of getting firearms in the near future, legal, of course. Reason being because humanity has lost its humanity, and for this reason, we will all lose. Thank you, City Council.
Greta New.
She's joining the Zoom right now.
Thank you.
Greta, whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Hello, folks. This is Greta New. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council. I appreciate having this time to talk about the importance of mental health professionals. Anyone who's ever undergone any sort of treatment by a professional, a licensed professional for mental health, understands that that is it's vital. And it is also really important that we understand that police officers, while they may be empathetic, or some may be empathetic, that's not their training. They undergo a very specialized training in the same way that mental health professionals undergo very specialized training. I wouldn't want to make spaghetti sauce with a rolling pin, though a rolling pin is great for rolling out pie crust. We really need to have a better sense of what folks have expertise in and what we can assign for them to do as work. Not only will it save lives, but it can save money if we are directing our funding towards mental health professionals to do the work that they need to do. I have been fortunate to have mental health professionals on my side and working for me. Not everybody has that privilege, and that's very sad. It is a real testament to the inequities in our society. But I would much rather talk to my therapist or counselor than to a group of armed police officers when I'm in a mental health crisis. I can't imagine that other people wouldn't also want that as well. I can't help also respond a little bit to the previous speaker, because I do understand that there are folks who wish ill on others, but I think most of us really do not. And the reason that the police force started was not because people were evil, but because there were people in power who wanted to reserve their own privilege and power and wanted to prevent other people from having the same sort of experience. So the history of policing in the United States is not about necessarily helping one another, but about retaining rights for some privileged communities. So I would just urge folks who are interested in that to look into the actual history of policing in the United States. And I also want to say really quickly that the idea of Black Lives Matters does not mean that other lives do not matter. What it means is that Black lives currently do not get the attention that they deserve. And that is why we have to say that Black Lives Matter. It is not a denigration of other lives. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll cede the floor to the next person.
Jennifer Bannister.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Bannister. Several of you know me from Teen Empowerment. And that for the past 15 years, in response to youth concerns about their interactions with police, TE youth leaders and adult staff have worked to humanize relationships between Black and Brown youth and RPD officers through honest dialogue. At the individual level, we have heard stories and witnessed glimmers of hope in how officers whom we've gotten to know approach young people on Genesee Street with more empathy and de-escalation, We've also learned a lot about the experiences police have had on the job that damage the well-being and mental health of officers, including high rates of suicide, alcoholism, addiction, and stress in relationships. And we have seen how youth voice has helped to move some policy reforms toward community policing and hiring officers of color who grew up in cities, especially Rochester. Still, as powerful as it can be, we have known for a long time that our work will only ever be able to achieve harm reduction as long as we are operating in a system where over 80% of the training is focused on paramilitary force and operations, even though the majority of interactions and calls require skills in human service, where the culture is about good guys versus bad guys and us versus them, in a department where 93% of the officers do not live in our city, and where talking about racism and Black Lives Matter often becomes a third rail during the dialogues. We've even had Black officers confide that they were not able to discuss their feelings about racism amongst their colleagues. Over the past 2 weeks, as a community, we have been reminded up close and personal of how truly dehumanizing America's system of policing can be. You've heard all about that tonight, and some of you have even seen it in person. So I'll just share a few other observations. On Friday the 4th, not long before RPD attacked protesters on the bridge, I ran into an officer whom we've worked closely with over the years at one of the blockades. I would not have recognized her, but it was right before her unit put on their riot gear. It was clear that she had no idea that youth and adults from TE had been out every night expressing the pain of repeated trauma against Black and brown people. I know her heart, and I also heard in her voice that she was experiencing this simply as an assault on her team. Us officers under attack against those angry protesters and anonymous protesters. The protests absolutely have chants and shouting that dehumanize the wall of officers clad in RoboCop gear, but this is the symptom and not the cause. When we study history, we know that since its origins, American policing has dehumanized and brutalized Black and brown people. Meanwhile, there is a grace that protesters regularly share with hours of singing to officers whose faces you cannot see, who are holding billy clubs and pepper ball guns at the ready. People walk up to the line by themselves, exposed, and show their rawest emotions. There's nothing more human and generous than that. Often they are appealing to the officers to think about their own humanity, to ask them, why don't you speak up when another officer is doing something wrong? Would you have a blanket over Daniel? Look at these beautiful people out here tonight. You could choose not to shoot at us. On the night when finally RPD had decided to stand down their forceful response, one of the lead organizers shared why agitation in the streets is so important for making change when society hits an untenable moment. She said, those who cannot hear must feel, and there is nothing more humanizing than to feel. We need this moment and future dialogue to lead to transformative justice and nothing less. Let's start with the 5 legislative policies that FTP has laid out. Please, Council, take those on with the community. I know we can build something together that better reflects our humanity. Thank you all.
That was our last speaker for the night.
So I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening, and I'd certainly like to thank everyone who logged into the call and joined us tonight. We'll conclude this segment at this time. Good night.